So this is the last of the Energy Resources Chapter 13 lectures. And this is on energy efficiency. And so this is really probably one of the easiest ways that we could come about reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and even alternative fuels. If you look at here, especially this first one, improved energy efficiency, say 1/3 of global energy use and 43% in the United States. So that's really a goal I think we can reach. Again, that doesn't mean we have to require new energy. It's definitely sustainable if we can get our efficiencies down, our efficiencies up, not down. We're heading in the wrong direction. Okay, so it's a measure of work from each unit of energy, and we're going to talk about that. You know, and we have ways of dealing with things, and we just don't do it well. So we need to get a lot more efficient. Okay, so how can we improve efficiency? Cogeneration is one way. It's co means together. And so we are looking at ways of producing energy in two different systems. One of the field trips we take, the Carrizo Plains, we look at some oil fields. And there are some cogeneration plants out there where they're using the oil for energy, but they're also using steam. And so it's a lot more efficient that way. Okay, electric cars, recycling, improving data centers, computer cooling is a huge place where we use energy, converting electric grids into smart grids. Some of us have done this in our houses where we have a thermostat that can be programmed. And then obviously working on alternative energy like solar and wind, and then hooking it to the grids. And maybe even looking at how to change those grids. Okay, yeah, and there's lots and lots of ways to improve efficiency. So one, we can talk about hidden costs in marketing. You know, we've been mentioning that over and over in gasoline. You know, we lose our mind when it hits $5 a gallon. But reality, it probably should cost like $15 a gallon. And if it costs $15 a gallon, I guarantee you'd be conserving it. You'd be looking at alternative transportation. But again, subsidies to the oil and gas industry has caused this, and there's no incentive, at least with the powers to be, to change that. Now we're going into a new presidency, so maybe there'll be some changes, but those changes are slow. Okay, you can save energy where you live. You know, just insulating your house, using water more efficiently, heating water more efficiently. They're turning over to waterless tanks, heaters, water heaters. That way you're not heating the water constantly. It's heat by demand. A little more expensive than a regular water heater. You have to change out the system, but once it's in, and it does take some care every year. Actually, water heaters do too, but most people don't. But any of those can save energy. You know, pulling one of the Green Book things was unplugging all your TVs and stuff when they're not in use, because even then they still pull energy. All right, advantages and disadvantages. I want to make sure it's not all rosy and sweet when we talk about renewable energy. You know, we really going to have to look on those changes, and those changes are hard. I mean, advantages obviously less pollution and less destruction, but it's going to take some subsidies. It's going to take some tax incentives. It's going to change our system, which people are hard to do. And you know, transitioning can take up to 60 years, and do we have that kind of time? All right, heating and cooling building. Let's look at some of the things we can do. One is the way our buildings are set up. We have passive heating and active solar heating. And passive heating is just the way the house is set up. You know, having your house face the right direction, having your windows where heat can come in during the cooler months, but not the summer months. You've seen me recording from my porch. I have an old 1911 house, and they were designed that way. They were designed, the porch is to actually block sun from coming in the living room to keep it cooler. The windows are set up to move airflow through the house, and it does actually cool the buildings. Active solar heating is often you can put some kind of conductor on the roof that pumps water, heats up water, and then pumps it through the house to warm it up. They have radiant floor heating now. I had a friend who actually heated her pool that way. She liked her pool really warm, so she to save money, she put a solar collector on her roof of her house just to heat her pool. So there are ways to do it, and even cooling buildings. So one is shade, one is the color of the roof. We like the look of the darker roofs, but cooler roofs actually reflect heat better. And there's even geothermal heating from underground in other parts of the country. We don't really do that here in Southern California. All right, passive and active trade-off. So you can read these. There are pluses and minuses always. So make sure you take a look at this. Using sunlight to produce heat and electricity. There's no direct CO2. It is obviously, as we expand, it is using more and more land. We need to make it affordable. In Southern California especially, it's probably a shame that we don't have solar panels on all the houses, pull ourselves off the grid. It can be done, but we probably need incentives, which we had some incentives in place, but I think we need to push those harder. And a way to hook up to the grid. Okay, electricity from falling and flowing water. We've talked about dams. They do a lot of destruction, but there are once they're in place, it is a way to use that energy. And there's also ways of doing micro hydropower. Having tiny little droppings of water from rivers and stuff. So there are ways to do it. We just have to get more creative. And then electric and wind power. This is something, if you drive down the 10 freeway, you see these wind machines. They were talking about putting in the ocean. There is some visual pollution, people say. And there is some problems with birds and bats running into these things and being killed. That does happen, especially at night during migratory routes. It's not real cost effective to do this, but there are places that can be done. In Maui, they actually have a hillside going up one of the small hills or mountains, I guess hill. You can see them going up the side, and you could actually, unlike here, you could actually drive and sit underneath those things, which is amazing to me. Have a picnic right underneath. And then biofuels can be burned as solid fuel. Okay, burning again can cause maybe some issues, but ethanol was one of the things you heard about maybe 10, 15 years ago. And renting cars on ethanol and a product from plants and plant waste, and biodiesel, which is vegetable oil. But it has problems. The combustion engines that we have don't work well on those. But then again, also you are maybe taken away from areas we grow crops. Although if you're using plant waste, that's not probably as big a deal. So check out the trade-offs for those. Geothermal energy, like I mentioned before. In places it would be a good idea. Maybe that's what we need to think of. We always think of, do it for everybody, but maybe we have to be smarter and start looking, where do you live and what are your best options. And then hydrogen. Why will hydrogen save us, or will it? We've talked about it over and over. It produces water as its waste product, which obviously is advantageous. Water vapor is not as big a deal. Eliminates pollution caused by fossil fuels. It's challenging though, and very, very expensive, and can be explosive, so that could be a problem also. But there are technologies out there that we need to look at and see if these things will actually work. So here are some of the solutions. I'll let you read through those. But if you look at improved energy efficiency, more renewable energy, and reducing pollution and health risks, that should be our goals. That should be our sustainability goals. And with that, we will end share and end the recording.